weapon will prosper. No enemy triumph. He will not overcome. He can't scale these walls. Injustice will not win. Hell's gates will not prevail. Not on my time. Not on my watch. I am a watchman, and I take my place. As I wait, I will keep the faith. 'Cause I am a watchman, and I stand my ground. But if I never see it, I will stay the course. I will run the race, I will fight the fight, and I will keep the faith. I keep my eyes fixed on you.
Afternoon, everybody. Pastor Tim Karskaden here from Christian Center Shreveport. Our pipeline report today here on the 18th day of November 2024, 11/18. 18, the number of life. We love that number. We pray you are walking in the goodness of life today. So glad you joined us. Thanks for following us here either on YouTube or Rumble. We use those platforms only because of the controversial issues we discuss on this report. And we want to make sure we don't get censored. And maybe that'll change when President Trump comes into office and we start having a new FCC chairman who hopefully is going to address the censoring battles that all of us in our movement have had to experience these last 4 years plus. And we're hoping that that'll shift and we'll have the liberty to have our free speech, First Amendment rights liberated on all social media platforms. That's the goal. I believe our prayer should be for that. So you pray with us. Share with a friend today if you like. Make sure you, as they always say, click like, do that. Share this feed with somebody else that you think would be interested in praying for America, praying for the office of president, praying for the purpose of our nation in this hour. That's how this ministry started 4+ years ago. Was the Lord told us to pray for the president and to have a pipeline ministry where we send it down the pipeline and others get informed, equipped, where they have directives on how to pray, how to be active in their regions and their communities, to be a part of the change that needs to come about rather than being part of any problem that could go on. So we had a great meeting yesterday here at Christian Center Shreveport. And you know our heart for Israel first. We had a speaker from the Samaria area, Shmuel Younger, come and spoke, and he really gave us a background of the October 7th event of 2023 and led us to where they are now and the battles that they're facing in Israel now. I'd encourage you to go watch that. You just, if you don't have to watch the worship and all. If you don't want to, you can just forward it to his message. We also had a friend from Ukraine share some of the battles that they're going on, that's going on in Ukraine as well. I'll be meeting with them later today to get more information of how we can help in our prayer movement for the nation of Ukraine. And that's very important because we'll get into it here a bit later of President Biden's decision to release missiles to Ukraine to really increase the war effort there. And we'll talk about the pluses and minuses of that here shortly. So I want to just kind of lay the foundation. We're going to talk about several things, the failure to close the race. We're going to talk about the election. But first, let's deal with Israel. Zach has some information that's very important. I do want to say this, that the ICC, International Criminal Court, has threatened to prosecute and arrest Benjamin Netanyahu and other Israeli leaders. Unprecedented, never done, no proof for what they're doing. They're just doing it. And America has not took a strong stance on this in the Biden administration, but with the Trump administration coming in, it's already been noted that there's going to be a change. New incoming House Majority Leader, Senator John Thune from South Dakota, made a speech or put it on his X page yesterday. Here's what he said: "If the ICC and its prosecutor do not reverse their outrageous and unlawful actions to pursue arrest warrants against Israeli officials, the Senate should immediately pass sanctions legislation, as the House has already done, in a bipartisan basis. If Majority Leader Schumer does not act, the Senate Republican majority will stand with our key ally Israel and make this and other supportive legislation a top priority in the next Congress." Kudos to Senator Thune on that one. We celebrate with him on that message. Thank you for doing that, Senator. If I could speak to him, I would tell him thank you for doing that. And so it's very clear we have a difference of opinion. Where all of a sudden, if you saw Schumer yesterday came out and just says, we need to work in bipartisan ways. He hasn't for 4+ years, 8+ years, he hasn't worked in a bipartisan way at all. And then all of a sudden he wants to be in a bipartisan way. So as well as McConnell, we have some problems with him as well. We know he's not a Trump fan, to say the least. He does not support Trump in many different ways. And he's making it very difficult already in the transition. But when it comes to Israel, we have to stand strong. So, Zach, you have some clips here from Caroline Glick on some of the things that we're facing here as this administration leaves, the Biden administration leaves, and the Trump administration comes. And as we know, much of the Republicans have told the Democrats before they leave not to destroy documents concerning the Mar-a-Lago case, the Jack Smith case, all these other cases, the Georgia case, etc., because the Democrats have a habit of losing emails, deleting emails, destroying evidence. So this is a real issue. Zach, why don't you come in and talk a little bit about some of the information we've gotten about the information especially from October 7 and the Biden administration's information on that.
Yeah, so I want to take a step back in helping us understand what's really going on here. Obviously, we have the elections, but for understanding the United States involvement, we have to understand kind of the internal workings of what's going on in Israel. And what we're seeing is, a few weeks ago, you saw Netanyahu oust a high-level leader. And what that now is leading to is court cases against Netanyahu. Obviously, Thune's really demand, and more so that he's laying out there of, hey, this is kind of what's going to happen day one when we come in, is good for backing Netanyahu. Netanyahu is now being forced to go before the Supreme Court of Israel, in a sense, to be able to defend himself against things that are very well known to just be nothing burgers at the end of the day. There has been a lower level IDF officer who was more so helped push up in what Israel is calling, or the left within Israel are calling, leaks up to the prime minister's office in regards to the knowings pre-October 7th. And so I want to play a clip here from Caroline Glick, who kind of talks about this a little bit. So just hear how what she's talking about, and she'll kind of explain the situation that I'm talking about here, where we can understand the real issue of what's going on inside Israel, and the issues that the Biden administration is having to kind of walk back, in a sense, and trying to make sure they themselves are not implicated moving forward.
We've suspended Lieutenant Colonel Ron Sheriff and Colonel Chezi Nechama from the services, as if there's a moral equivalence between talking about how to better win this war and dismantling the IDF reserve forces. Okay, like one is treason, and the other one is constructive criticism, right? And they can't, and they think that this is okay. That's why they did nothing against Sheriff until the public outcry grew too powerful, and they were quick to oust Nechama from service for challenging them and pointing out their incompetence in leading this war. And that's how the IDF is operating. And then you see the IDF going against the prime minister and claiming that he was extorting a senior officer when no such thing was occurring, and that he was doctoring protocols when the doctoring of the protocols was to try to make a correction about 11-minute gap between when it was first reported to the prime minister, as if it matters at a certain point when you report to him, when you didn't report to him at 4 o'clock in the morning when you knew that Hamas was about to invade Israel and you didn't think it was important for the prime minister to know. Okay, so this is what's happening. So when Gallant was fired, Gallant was their rubber stamp. Gallant was allowing the refusal to serve in the army, to go forward without a peep. He's allowed Herzi Halevi not only to remain in his duty after he completely failed the country on October 7th, but to appoint the next generation of the general staff. He appointed a new intelligence head, even though the guy who he appointed was culpable for the operational failure on October 7th. Binder, he was head of operations, and there were no operations.
And so what she's talking about here, and the point I want to point out is they're starting to learn who the specific people are who have prevented the IDF from moving forward, because you have two different camps within the IDF who have been operating. You have those who want to, who are more patriotic in a sense, as how we would understand it here as Americans, who want Israel to be free and to be able to defend themselves. And then you have those with the opposing view that says, oh, these people aren't bad. Let's just let them live, give them more money, give them what they want. They'll go away. They'll stop bombing us, which is never worked. And if you were here yesterday hearing Shmuel talk, that was the shift from even those who were even on the front lines, whose lives were at risk and whose lives were lost. That's what they thought. And now there's a shift going on and a reset of the mind within Israel about that. And she goes on later to talk about, and I'm going to bring this up, about how, let me find it here real fast, where new potential nominated U.S. ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, comes out and basically says, hey, we're going to let Israel determine what Israel wants to do. And so this is a mindset and something we need to understand. And this is completely different than what Israel is working under right now, where the current administration is saying, no, you have to do what we want. And the left in Israel is saying, well, we just have to do what the United States wants. We can't really do anything. So let me play this here, and we can hear it straight from the horse's mouth as far as what Mike Huckabee really said.
Interview that he gave a while back to Channel 7, to Arutz Sheva, where he was explaining, here, let me just play, because it's wonderful every time I hear it, I giggle.
My feelings personally, and I'm speaking only as a person, I think Israel would only be acting on the property it already owns. I think Israel has title deed to Judea and Samaria. There are certain words I refuse to use. There is no such thing as a West Bank. It's Judea and Samaria. There's no such thing as a settlement. They're communities, they're neighborhoods, they're cities.
So Huckabee said this, and everybody's like, oh, look, the Americans are going to be pushing Israeli sovereignty. And what Huckabee did the other day was he gave another follow-up interview to Arutz Sheva, and he said to them, Israel has to decide what they want to do with Judea and Samaria. This, by the way, is what his predecessor, David Friedman, wrote in his book, One Jewish State, where he advocated on behalf of Israeli sovereignty in Judea and Samaria. But he said, it's your decision, Israel. You have to make that decision. Right? You decide what you want. You're a grown-up. You're an ally. You're not a vassal state. You make that determination. And that's what Huckabee said in his follow-up interview with Channel 7, I keep saying Channel 7 because Arutz Sheva in English is Channel 7, but they just call themselves Arutz Sheva in English as well. Anyway, so that's what he said in his follow-up with them. He said, it's your decision. I can want whatever I want, but it's your decision, Israel. It's the same. Lindsey Graham said over the weekend, I think on Saturday, he spoke with the prime minister, and JNS reported the conversation, said, Lindsey Graham said to Israel, it's up to you what you want to do with Iran. What you want to do with Iran's nukes. You want to bomb the nuke installations? Fine. It's up to you. It's your call. It's a threat to your existence. You decide, Israel. Same thing with the Palestinians. Same thing with Gaza. You're a grown-up. We trust you. You make that decision. And this is an incredible act of respect, right? Which Israelis aren't used to. Under the Bush administration, the United States led. They had this idea that they were promoting democracy in the Arab world. It totally failed in the event, but all the same, there was a sense of an American leadership. This was an American mission. America was leading the world. They had this big coalition of NATO and others that were fighting with them in Afghanistan in Operation Enduring Freedom. They were fighting with them in Iraq in Operation Iraqi Freedom. And we were all supposed to get on board. The Palestinian piece of this from the Bush administration was statehood. That the
And again, she goes on here to later explain. I'm going to add your comments here, and let me try to find this other portion of the clip where she talks
Sure.
about how the Biden administration is she's speculating where they're going around and could possibly get rid of documents, and she talks about the constitutionality of it, and she doesn't really understand it, but because she's an Israeli. And so the issue here, and it comes along with the court case with Netanyahu in Israel, is that they're kind of trying to keep that stuff quiet as far as the U.S.'s involvement in subverting the IDS movements, actions against Netanyahu, et cetera, stuff like that, because they're possibly going to be implicated now that Trump is in office and going to have this mindset. And the reason I wanted to play that portion of it is so we understand the complete shift in culture now that Israel will have. And the name she mentioned there, Sharif, is one of the major leaders within the subversive movement within the IDF under Gallant, who has been preventing the current administration to be able to go in. And she, before that, had talked about how, and I'll stop here after this and let you speak, is that she talked about how there were members of the reserve unit who say they wanted to come in and get a higher position, an officer's position, to a very high level combat unit. Well, they knew if they went to this guy that they would not get in if they were basically patriots. He would only let in woke DEI people. And unfortunately, where you're seeing a lot of the lives lost are from his unit. And so what he's doing now is he had the ability under Gallant to be able to put people in higher level positions, as she talked about there on that one clip I put out there. And so that's very concerning, something we want to pray about for not only thinking about within the Biden administration of who is in there now that the Trump administration has to come in and move these people out, but then also within Israel for their peace and safety moving forward as well. So, but
Yeah,
say a few things and let me try to find
let me
this.
build on what Governor Huckabee said and new ambassador to Israel. Yesterday, an article, an opinion piece came out of Jerusalem Post by Michael Frood, and he said southern Lebanon is actually northern Israel. This is an opinion, but it also is biblical opinion. And he puts in his article here, it says here, and indeed in biblical times, southern Lebanon was clearly part of the land of Israel. In the book of Genesis 10:19, it says that the borders of Canaan reached from Sidon, which is all the way up northern Lebanon toward Gerar, as far as Gaza and towards Sodom. And that's the whole, this is Judea and Samaria we're talking about here. Adama and Tsurim, as far as Lasha. Sidon is a city in Lebanon about halfway between the current Israeli border and Beirut. So just prior to our biblical patriarch, Jacob blessed his 12 sons, and the blessing gave to Zebulun. For Zebulun will live by the seashore, and some a haven for ships. The border extend towards Sidon. That's Genesis 49:13. And then it goes on in Joshua 13:16, where Sidon, if you go look on a map, you'll find out that's all the way up in Lebanon. So what we're seeing here is a returning to the biblical mandates of what Scripture is. Now, obviously, Israel's not taking territory and saying this is our sovereign territory and all that. They're not going to do that. That'd be World War III right now. But it's very interesting because in the prophetic sense, the Israelis' shoes, the soles of their feet, are on the soil that God said belongs to them. And I think that's very important what Governor Huckabee said. And I like what he says. Don't call it West Bank. Don't call it settlements. These are communities. And that's what we had yesterday. We had Shmuel Younger here talking about the communities they're building in Samaria and Judea. And these are legal communities. They're not illegal settlements, as the left would call it. They're legal communities. It's very clear that they have a right to build there. They are building there, and they're fulfilling a biblical mandate, which is we're seeing, and we want to stand with that. That's our whole goal in that. And we don't want to be complicit, what Zach's talking about, being part of the problem of what is happening here and trying to drive out the movement that Benjamin Netanyahu and his administration is moving. And I will say this, what she said there is very important, and Shmuel and I were talking yesterday. The main thing Israelis are going to have a problem with is if Benjamin Netanyahu knew all this information and didn't act on it, they will stand with him if the information was withheld from him by leaders within the government, et cetera, which it tends to be. That's where it's leading to right now. The information was not given to him. You got to understand, for years and years, these plans have been on, and we talked about this yesterday as well in my private conversation. These plans by Gaza have been on planned for years and years. And it gets to be, we have a saying in America and the world, I think, the guy keeps crying, the sky is falling, and it's not. So everybody kind of gets used to hearing that message. The Hamas is going to attack, and they're not. And Shmuel said yesterday in his message that Sinwar and Nasrallah were supposed to have a deal where they both attacked Israel at the same time. And Sinwar and Nasrallah were competing, and Sinwar jumped ahead of Nasrallah, and he expected Nasrallah to jump in on October 7th. He did not. And so therefore they had to act alone. And then now we're going to get to this place where it was America complicit, or they have information, and are they trying to cover up anything right now?
Yeah, and I found the portion I want to play, and it left off at the first portion of the video that I stopped before I played the Huckabee clip. And what she's referencing here when I play this is that there is the lower level IDF soldier who I mentioned earlier, who was taken into custody and treated worse than a terrorist within Israel. They wouldn't even let him speak to his lawyers, which is kind of worse than what Israel even lets how they treat terrorists. Like, they even allow terrorists to speak to their lawyers before they do an interrogation or anything of such nature. But they're not letting one of their own even do that because it subverts the leftist ploy. And what she talks about here is how the Biden administration was complicit in this. They knew about this. They knew about the political rallies and things that were taking place against Netanyahu. And she mentions it here about what she believes needs to be asked from the Trump transition team of preservation of documents. But I'm going to play this at 1.5 speed because it's rather a long clip, but I want to make sure we hear all of this to understand kind of the full context straight from the horse's mouth on somebody who's in the land reporting on this.
Warriors and on and on and on. So he's continuing to make his appointments. Gallant is serving as his rubber stamp, and he's working with Lloyd Austin and working essentially to advance the American agenda of not.
And who she's speaking about here is the Sharif, who is the lower level IDF military leader who's making all these subversive appointments to prevent basically IDF from making the proper moves that they need to make.
Non-IDF victory in the war, conquest of Rafah, non-intervention in Lebanon, and all of these other strategic goals that Israel achieved. And Netanyahu finally felt that he was powerful enough politically to oust Gallant from power. And that flipped him out because now they have no guardrail. Now they have no way of undermining the prime minister because Israel Katz, the new defense minister, isn't one of them. And Gallant is. And they can't trust him. And he may actually not hide information from the prime minister. He may actually fire Herzl Levy. And he may actually not approve Herzl Levy's appointments going forward. And he may actually cancel Herzl Levy's appointments going backwards. So, this is a real problem for them, that Gallant is no longer there. It's very dangerous. Gotta overthrow the government as quickly as possible. And the other reason is because Trump, and which I'll get to in a second, he is not going to enable them. You had all of these reports, I've gone over them over the past year, both writing and in these conversations, where you have leaders of these anti-government riot groups bragging. This one guy, Amit Rohr, repeatedly in these open messages to his supporters on Twitter that he's meeting with senior officials in the White House, and this is what they're telling him, and this is what they expect the rioters to do now. And he's giving them what he claims are direct orders from the Biden White House that is, organizing, leading them in their color revolution, essentially their fake color revolution, to oust the democratically elected leader of Israel, both before October 7th and while we're fighting the Seventh Front War for our national survival. So that, they're not going to have that kind of backstopping anymore. They're going to have funding. They're not going to have political support from the United States for their efforts to oust the prime minister from power. You're not going to have Tony Blinken anymore coming to Israel and meeting with brothers in arms, meeting with people like Ron Sharf and embracing them and coordinating with them. You're not going to have that anymore. So it's very scary. In fact, you're going to have people who would totally support much deeper judicial reform than what the government attempted to do in 2022 and 2023. Much deeper, much more significant towards restoring democratic norms of governments inside of Israel, right? And that's very scary, And And it would be very helpful, I think, if members of Trump's transition were to say, publicly to people in the Biden administration, look, we want preservation of records here about everything having to do with the anti-government protests in Israel. I think that would be a very helpful thing to do. Let's see what's going on. We're not interested in having those records destroyed in any way. It's very important to understand, at least, I'm not saying it's necessarily criminal on the American perspective. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But, let's get a clear understanding of what has just been going on for the past 2 years. Douglas Murray, I just want to play you this little clip.
Okay, so she says it best there. There at the end is, the Democrats have a history of having documents just mysteriously disappear. And so her suggestion is that the Trump transition team needs to come in, like I said before, and tell the Biden administration, hey, don't delete documents. You can't do that. She gets to the point of later on where she talks about the constitutionality of it. And obviously there's an issue there that if they're going to try to hide this, show their involvement, this would ultimately make Netanyahu's case for him, that not only were the left within Israel subverting him, but also was the White House, and would prove to the world just the mindset that is trying to hold Israel back and not letting them do what the Trump administration transition team is saying to do. And even what Mike Huckabee and Senator Lindsey Graham are saying is, basically, we respect you to make the proper decision to defend yourself because, one, you're there, what's actually going on, and you have the capability of defending yourself, and we're going to get out of the way. Let's not forget, in summarizing this, is that the Biden administration has 4 months on multiple fronts been preventing the shipment of weapons and equipment to Israel that they specifically need in this direct moment right now to be able to defend themselves. They do not have it. They're fighting them even to this day, and probably until January 20th when they have to give it over. They will do everything within their power to prevent them, as Blinken and everybody is going around and trying to cry for a ceasefire even in their last waning days. Thankfully, Netanyahu and his administration understand this, even though Netanyahu will spend a lot of time within the court systems. The people that he has put in place now understand what the playing field is like and can hold on a little longer until reinforcements can come in the new administration here in the United States. So let's continue to pray for the next administration. Let's pray for this current administration, and more so specifically the Israeli administration, where they understand they don't have to give in to these ploys that the Democrats have been trying to do here under the Biden administration. And so they've done a good job of calling the bluff of this current administration, and hopefully Huckabee and the Trump team can stand behind Israel and not try to do the exact same thing that Bush did in trying to force Israel to do what he wants. So that is a concern for some in Israel. That is a concern for some here in America, and that's what we want to pray for.
Yeah, remember, President Trump said yesterday that he would not, day one, everything that's been promised to them will be shipped to them. So we know that that's coming. As you know, the Biden administration uses that for leverage. They've done it in Ukraine as well. They've announced now yesterday that he wants to give Ukraine the weapons that has already been approved by Congress a long time ago. And that's just a bad strategy. If you ask most generals, most analysts, is that what he offered them yesterday should have been offered 1,000 days ago. And this is kind of where they are. But anyway, we're going to shift now, move the election. We got to finish this House race. That's what the kind of topic today, failure to close. We've got to close this race out. The ridiculous ability of the California legislatures, the voting system to count the votes is a big issue. So let me give you a little analysis of what's going on here. I know that may be hard to see if you're watching on your phone or something, but if you got your computer, it may be easier to see. But when you look at this, the tallies here, these are the congressional districts we're waiting. First of all, Alaska's not listed there, and I'll get to that in a second. But California, District 13, the Republican has a 1 point lead with 86% of the vote counted. The Iowa District 1, Republicans leading. It says 0 there, but is leading with 99%. You have what we call the election deniers in Iowa that will not surrender this one. And this is the one that's most disturbing here is in California District 45, 93.67% of the vote is counted. And what has happened here is it's just trickled in for days and days. No counting was going on in District 45. That's around Southern California, just a little bit west of Los Angeles on the coast there, Huntington Beach area, that area. It's a weird, it looks like it was a gerrymandered district anyway, the way they moved it around there. But anyway, that was there. And I've been watching this vote very closely. So let me pull this one up. I'll let you see. Let me see this one here where the actual election results here. Let me pull this one up, Zach. This is the one I want to look at. And it shows 218 votes right now for let me get there. You go. There you can see it. And this is what we're looking at. So this is where we look at let me pull up. Here's the Iowa District 1. If you can see this, 50% for the Republican, the incumbent, Miller Meeks, with 206,940, and the Democrat, 206,139. I mean, it's very close, 800 votes, 99%. They will not call this race. They just refuse to. We can't figure out why, but they're just not calling this race there in Iowa. So that we know, believe that's going to become a seat for Republicans. It's just the deniers are unwilling to do this. Now, the California District 45, this is the most bizarre thing. There's many districts. Look at all these districts, and there's 52 districts in California. But 45, and this is what's happened right now. This is with 93.6% of the vote in. The Democrat is leading 152,981 to 152,945. So we're talking about a 30-something vote lead with 93.67. This is what I want y'all to pray about. This district is driving me crazy. It was just last week we were at 60-something%. It's taken them a week to get another 30% in. I did read where 90% of all the ballots in that district were mail-in ballots, provisional ballots, et cetera. So that's where that's ripe for corruption. But as I've been watching this last week, the trickling of 2%, 3% more added, so forth, almost all votes are going for the Democrat, not for the Republican at all. I'm not saying it's not accurate, but it's very, very suspicious that as we've seen this, and the Steele was leading, the incumbent was leading just a few days ago, but now these votes are trickling in. They just so happen to all be for the Democrat. And so we still got 7%, 6.7% here. So we want to pray that any injustice is there, would be settled. Okay. And the Alaska race is very unusual. This is where the Republican has a quite large lead here. In the way we look at voting, he's got 155,000, 48% versus 146 to the incumbent there, the Democrat incumbent. Now, here's the problem in Alaska, everybody. They do ranked voting. Let me explain this to you. Begich, which is the Republican that's leading right now, because he doesn't have 50% of the vote, they don't call this race, even though he's clearly got the lead. So here's what happens. You're looking at these two other candidates, Howell and Hafner. So what they do in this ranked voting, when you vote, you go in and vote for who you want, and then you rank who you'd like. If he can't win, who do you want the number 2 person? If they can't win, who you want the number 3 person, so forth. It goes on down. So all the voters voted this way. So Begich obviously won, but you don't know who they voted for their second one. Okay, this is kind of the weird thing. We would go to a re-election if we were to do it in most states. But they don't do that. They're avoiding the re-election by doing this new recount, as we call it. So what happens, the Hafner guy, the fourth guy there, he gets cut out. He gets cut out of the race, and now it's the top 3. The question is, and I've been asking my people in Alaska, and nobody's given me the answer because they don't know. What happens if you voted for Hafner if you're second? If they pull him out, do you lose your vote? I don't know the answer to that question. I've looked everywhere to figure it out, and it's so confusing. So the question is, here's what could happen. If you voted for Begich your first, but you voted for Patoli the second, your vote, you'll lose your vote in a sense, and it'll move up. So we don't know what's going to happen. We think it's a clear voice because the lead's so large, as President Trump says, too big to rig. It looks like this will be a safe way. This is just, if you ask me, a dumb way of voting. I think there's 2 other states that do this as well. There's other countries that do it, but that's going on there. So that's the big issue there. And I think I did the Iowa. Okay, I've done all the districts. The other California district, which it looks like the Republicans are going to hold on. Now, if it all plays out properly, and they can pull out the 45, we'll have 222 seats, if not 221. It looks like that's what's going to happen there. So pray into that District 45, especially these last 6%, and then also that Iowa would quit denying, and that Alaska would turn out right. Okay, so that's the House and the state. The Senate is 53. We have the denial going on in Pennsylvania, which we want to talk about here for just a second. Zach, you want to say anything on those other districts we just talked about?
One thing that's interesting is we've talked about this before, and you know, you have some on the right who are saying, you know, there was enough done to hopefully prevent this type of stuff from happening, but I think we're still seeing the length of the subversiveness from the 2020 election still kind of playing out. So I think this shows that there's still work need to be done. And on the Alaska case, this is kind of a key point people need to understand is there are a lot of states who, a lot of politicians in other states who favor that type of possible voting style because in their eyes it makes it simpler. But the issue is depending on the top two candidates, you have to reevaluate your vote. And maybe there's some who would vote for top, you know, Democratic candidate, but they wouldn't vote, you know, if their top candidate, let's say, ends up being third, they wouldn't vote for the number, you know, one Democratic candidate, vice versa. Like, so it's depending on scenarios where this is kind of convoluted and playing out. And hopefully Alaska itself can see this and other states can look at this and kind of play this out and game this out and realize this is not something going forward. Because there is also the reason I point this out, there has also been rumors and talks of making the file and rank voting federal at a national level. And so this is something we have to see is like, no, we don't want this. You know, let this be known. If you ever hear your local politicians say this is just utter disaster.
Fight it as much as you can. Absolutely.
Yeah, because of the possibility of you could possibly lose your vote if let's say your second candidate ends up being third or fourth and they're knocked out and you would always vote them number one. Well, you just now lost your vote if your candidate didn't
And
get
that's
put up in the top
undemocratic. It's against our law. That's against who we are. If your vote can't get counted, then something's wrong with the system. And I think that's what we're trying to allude to here. I think we bring that up. Well, speaking of the Pennsylvania senator race, somebody was just asking here, the House count 53, we believe the Democrats are fighting for the Casey seat in Pennsylvania. As you know, the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania, and we had this problem in 2020 as well. They ruled in the Supreme Court numerous times that you cannot count votes that are not signed properly. They didn't. They're illegal in the sense that some of them didn't have the right dates on them, etc. They ruled that. Well, when this recount came in from Senator Casey against McCormick there in Pennsylvania, he demands a recount, and he took it to the county court there in Pennsylvania and asked them to count illegal votes. That's what they did. And I want you to list. This is crazy. This is crazy. Identified it. And the judges in this court. So let me pull this link up here. You've got to hear this to believe this. And some of you may have already seen it, but it's a 3-panel judge here in, I forget the name of the county. I'll get it here in a second, in Pennsylvania. But this is their statements as they were voting.
We reject all 3 categories of these ballots.
Your motion is to reject or dismiss the challenges in this category in front of you?
Correct, yep.
I'm not going to second that, mostly because I think we all know that precedent by a court doesn't matter anymore in this country, and people violate laws anytime.
Yes, she just said that. She says precedent, which is what law is based on, doesn't matter in this country. I got to play it again. You can't believe what she just said. Listen.
Doesn't matter anymore in this country, and people violate laws anytime they want. So for me, if I violate this law, it's because I want a court to pay attention to it.
Now, we got to make sure there's no
First
cheating.
of all, the oath that she took as a lawyer and a judge, she's breaking her oath. And the guy sitting in the middle is quiet, but he voted with her because it was a 2-3 vote, 2-1 vote. To me, if you're going to follow the law, one, they should be brought before the attorney general should bring them forward and challenge them. Number one, you're breaking the law, you're openly breaking it, you're saying you're breaking it. I believe that they should be removed as being judges, but 2, they should also lose the bar should remove their ability to be a lawyer in the state of Pennsylvania. That's my thought. I may be a little biased, but that's it. Now Trump went on to say this.
that. We got more lawyers. We got more people watching. And I told them, if we win and when we win, we're going to prosecute people that cheat on this election. And if we can, we'll go back to the last one, too, if we're allowed. But we're going to prosecute people, so at least they know that's going to happen. And I said that because we have to have strong borders. You need two things.
We have much that is new and much that is.
Okay, so he goes all out and saying that. I don't know how much validity he can have in doing that, but the fact is, it needs to be said, this cannot be tolerated. And I think if you're from Pennsylvania watching today, please do some prayer work and begin to repent on behalf of your county judges there. And that's just wrong. It's just absolutely wrong. This reminds me of President Obama, who came out when he started his administration and said that the Constitution was antiquated, needed to be changed, transformation needed to happen. And well, here you have somebody actually trying to do that, subvert the Constitution of their own state and saying, I know that's a law, but we're going to break it anyway. Now, she did make a unique point. Is she's basically saying, I want to be challenged on this. And well, let's challenge her. And if they don't challenge her, if she gets away with this, now you have a new precedence that you can now do this and get away with it. So unfortunately, Republicans are going to have to spend the money. The RNC is going to have to spend the money of prosecuting her, going back to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. Look, the guy's not going to win anyway. I mean, he's got a big enough lead. Casey's not going to win, but you still have to do this, because if you don't, it can be done again. And that is a problem we're having right there. So that's about as bad as it gets. I don't think I've ever seen that before.
Yeah, and this goes back generations with Supreme Court justices who want to basically rewrite the Constitution. And so what she's trying to do is she's trying to make a big enough fuss, waste a lot of people's time in order to try to, like Roe v. Wade, rewrite the laws of the land. But the issue will be is that when you go before a Supreme Court, hopefully it can get dealt with the current makeup of the Supreme Court and get smacked down, as it already has been several times. And that's the issue. The Supreme Court has already, state Supreme Court and federal Supreme Court has decided, hey, this is kind of a non-issue. Why are you making this? And you also have Democrats, Fetterman himself, come out and saying these votes need to be counted. So you have some challenges there, some prayers that need to be had, and some kind of calling to the carpet some of these politicians who are ultimately undermining, one, the U.S. Constitution, but then two, even recent precedent from Pennsylvania Supreme Court. So this is just a complete subversion of power here.
Now think about this. If you were, let's say you are evil, you're not. We have a great righteous crowd here, but you lived in Pennsylvania. The election looks like Tuesday night's counted. Looks like you're behind. You go ahead and send your ballot in. Because it looks like, or you find an extra ballot, whatever, you send it in, because the election's not going the way you think it should. And now they're saying, well, you didn't get it in time, but now this judge says, doesn't matter, we're going to count it anyway. That's the kind of stuff that's going on. And we can't allow that in America. President Biden said, integrity of the election was restored this election. It's not true. There's cases all over the country where we still have election integrity issues. I think it's better than 2020, obviously, but it's still there going on as well. So let's shift out of this. Let's move to the border issue. Let's close with that today. As you know, President Trump is going to have to make a decision on the border. There is a whole caravan coming now trying to get in before the administration, but he did make the statements out of New York Post. It's out of other places as well, where he said Trump confirms plans to use military to deport migrants after declaring national emergency. And this was out on Truth Social today. A post from the Judicial Watch is citing these reports, is that he is going to declare a national emergency to use military assets to reverse the Biden invasion through a mass deportation program. And he wrote from his social media platform. Now, this is really the only way that, if you ask me, that President Trump can really deal with this issue, because otherwise he's going to be fought by Congress. The Democrats will fight, the Senate will fight as well. Some of the rhinos, etc., will fight this. And what a national declaration here it does for him, it kind of suspends that process and gives him the authority to begin to deal with this issue. It also gives him funding, which he needs to finish the wall, as well as deportations. Let's face it. Now, there's a lot of hyperbole and a lot of stuff being talked about. Oh, you're gonna ship grandma away. That's not gonna happen. Homan, that's his name. Homan, I guess his name. The czar is going to be there. He said that's not going to happen. We're going to go after criminals first. They have a long list of thousands of convicted criminals that are already there. They're going after them first. Some of these migrants are leaving cities right now because they know they're being targeted. It's almost the best way to catch them. Watch who's moving right now and follow them. But of course, the Biden administration won't be doing that. But that's one thing that can happen here. You saw in Chicago recently, the city council, the mayor came out and says, we're going to be a sanctuary city. We're going to take care of these people, et cetera, et cetera. And there was some really outspoken people that actually came against the city about that issue, which was quite interesting. They were screaming at the mayor and saying, this is not right, what you're doing to us. So there is a whole battleground going on there as well. I want to say this, that he confirms he's going to use this. Let me play one clip from the news czar about this issue. He was on Newsmax talking yesterday. So let me play this one. And
immigration, number one, he needs to secure that border. He needs to run a deportation operation, get rid of a lot of folks that aren't supposed to be here, especially the criminals and national security threats. And third, we need to find over 300,000 children that are missing in this country, that were trafficked into this country, released by this administration to unvetted sponsors. We got to find those children and rescue them.
All right. Do you have any budget, or is it your role to make sure other people do their jobs?
I'll be reporting straight to the president, so I'll be working very closely with Steve Miller. I'll be working really closely with Governor Noem to drill down on those three priorities. So I'm like a senior policy advisor. I'll be at the White House, and I'll be developing plans, developing strategies, how to take care of all three of these things the president wants to take care of.
Governor Noem, who's going to be Secretary of Homeland Security, got a big job on her plate at Homeland Security. I take you haven't spoken.
I'll stop there because he is really shifting to another topic there. But I want to say this. I had a dream about him last week. In my dream, I saw all his workers come to him in his office and he was giving directives to them on how to deal with the illegals and how to come against them. Deal with them. And my dream, I thought, oh, God, here we go. They're going to all fight him. They're not going to want to do what he says. They have other agendas. And in the dream, the Lord showed me that these people will carry out his orders, which was very encouraging to me. And they were going to be obedient. So to me, what the Lord was saying was a spirit of lawlessness was being broken off the ice and off the Border Patrol issue, if there was any in there. It's being broken off, and we're going to see obedient acts from the workers. So I celebrate that, pray into that. I prophesy that again, that they will be obedient to the directives that they're giving on the border there. So that's a big issue. I think a huge issue. Zach, you want to speak to that any?
Yeah, and we played a clip last week, which kind of confirms all of this and really gives you the mindset of Tom Homan and the new direction of where ICE and even Homeland Security is going. Of they ultimately just want to uphold the laws of the land. And he specifically talked about last week when we talked about it is he's going to target those who are in jail, who are known criminals, who they know need to be deported. And then on the grandma's case and the family's cases, they're going to go case by case. And that's where you can kind of have a little leniency of, okay, let's say they were seeking asylum. Let's say they've been here for a while. The issue is going to be around citizenship and whether they can get citizenship or not. And that's going to have to be adjudicated by, the Supreme Courts in the states that they're in. And so that's where you're going to have to follow the laws of the land. And then you're going to have to deal with not only federal laws, but then local laws as well of things going in, because the issue is the drain on the economy through taxpayer dollars going for illegal immigrants' health care and et cetera, things of that nature, school systems that are being drained, who these people are not paying back into the system. They're draining and they're not paying back in. And so that's the cause for concern here. Whether those type of people will be deported or not is going to be left up to the court systems and the laws of the land that are going to have to play out there. And that's what he said he's going to do. He obviously, he might have his own personal opinion as we do, but he has to
Keep the law.
to act, yeah, within law and order. And he's gonna, as we talked about last week when we talked about this, he's gonna have to not be soft on crime.
Yep.
And that's the whole mindset. Hopefully everybody understands that terminology there is getting back to a way of ruling via justice and order, of law and order, if you want to call it that, and get away from the soft on crime democratic policies that have been implemented.
Yeah, I found that Chicago city council. Well, the mayor was speaking, making a sanctuary city. He said, you know, he's not going to abide by Trump or anything like that. And this is the response of the community.
We paid for these properties for a purpose and not for you to go touching it with $300 million that you want to siphon out of the citizens' pockets. Get rid of the illegals, and that'll take your money right back.
You're a criminal. Why do I got to address you? The feds need to address you. DOJ need to address you, and hopefully Donald Trump will address you. Because you're going to protect the undocumented, while you're going to allow for the citizens in Chicago to suffer.
Y'all, come on. You leave that loser where he is. He's a loser. He's a loser.
Wow, look at that. Angry Chicago residents are furious.
Yeah,
Mayor Brandon
they're
Johnson.
they're furious to say the least. I don't blame them. She made a point there. $300 million the city and the taxpayers paid for these facilities for their community, or what they're doing for the Chicagoans who live there. And then he's going to take that facility and make it a migrant facility. That's what he's going to do. And I think her point was well made and well taken. And that's what it's going to take, folks, in a not just because they're African American, but that they are community people. The community people need to speak to community people. I say this all the time. When I lobby in Congress as senators and congressmen, especially when I go to my Louisiana congressional statesmen, I go in there. I also have other people with me in the meeting that are from all over the country who are pro-Israel, whatever. But when I sit across from my senator or my congressman, and I'm from Louisiana and they're Louisiana, they look at me with greater authority. Not that I'm saying I'm powerful, than the people from other parts of the country. Because why? I'm a constituent and I vote in their state. And I say this is very important that locals come out and speak out on these issues. If you're in Illinois, speak out on these issues. If you're in Chicago, definitely speak out on these issues. Don't worry about the color of your skin. You're a Chicagoan, you pay taxes, you have a right to speak out. This mayor, it makes me long for Lightfoot to come back. He's worse than her. And I feel sorry for the Chicagoans who have to put up with that nonsense and the crime and the murders and the death rates. It's so high in Chicago. And then he wants to bring in more, in a sense, problems to the community. They already have enough. They don't need to import them. And so now this new caravan that's coming, he is one of the ones who said, you're welcome. And the governor of Illinois said, we're putting the welcome mats out for them. Bring them on in. Now, remember, they get financial funding for this as well. And this is where President Trump's going to change everything. When he starts cutting the funding to these people, all of a sudden you're going to find, as he did in New York, Mayor Adams, when the funding started drying up, all of a sudden, my philosophy, my ideology changes now. And I think y'all need to move on down the road. You need to go to another place now because the funding's gone. And that's the fraud. That's what Musk and Vivek are going to work on because they're going to find those type of issues when we talk about waste of money and start cutting that money off to these agencies in these cities and these states who are doing such acts.
And the major point, especially for Chicago, is these lands and all these apartment buildings that are going, all the money going towards illegals, is these are violent gangs that are causing ruckus, to say the least. And if you understand the issue that's going on in Chicago, it's been warned about for a few months now, going back to the summer, that there is a possible gang war that could pop off in any second. And as long as the money keeps coming in, the illegal gangs or Venezuelan gangs who are in here, they're happy for now. But if the money dries up, these people are there. What's going to happen? What could start popping off between the black gangs versus the Venezuelan gangs? And so you're going to see what happens in the jail systems happen out on the streets, and that's not going to be pretty for the innocent lives and souls of those who are there. I know we know Abraham Hamilton, who is working with a bunch of churches there who are trying to do the best they can to help this situation, but it's becoming toxic by the day. And if you continue to allow these policies go forward, now it breeds the question of, well, the Chicagoans have voted this type of politicians in office. So are they getting what they deserve to a degree? Hopefully, this can cause them to wake up
Yes,
to the realities of what's going on,
that's right.
and be able to be aware of this going forward. And this is why we say it's crucial for the down ballot elections to not just vote for the top of the ticket, but to vote also in accordance with, for what we believe, biblical worldviews down ballot as well.
This is Mike Johnson's comment on this on the State of the Union yesterday.
It may be as many as 20 million undocumented persons, illegal aliens in the country. So this is a concern of communities all across America, not just the big cities, but rural areas as well, because they've been sent all over the nation. We need to send a message to people around the world that the open door is now being closed and that we are going to restore law and order. And I think that's what the American people are very hopeful and expecting that we will deliver upon. And we will. And President Trump's committed to it. He's the leader to do it.
Wow. And I think that's what, I think his statement there that we're closing the borders. And I think that's what needs to be heard right now. And our friend Speaker Mike Johnson, as you know, we haven't talked to you since then, but he was elected as kind of quiet, but as the next majority leader in this next Congress, the 119 Congress. And I'm so excited for him. If you didn't see, he was a little fun side note. He was at the fight, the UFC fight. He sent me a note. One of the best memes was he was with there, and it shows him a picture with some of these UFC people. And the meme was, this is what happens when a senior pastor goes to the youth group. I thought it was a pretty good picture. I was trying to find a way to put it up. But anyway, I think that's what we're looking at now. Fighters are there. We're fighting for this issue. And we want to close out today. Zach's pulled up the map here. We want to make sure we don't fail to close. We want to finish well with this election.
Yeah, and Miss Beth from North Carolina asked about the other races and the elections of where things stand. This is from the Hill of what they're reporting from Decision Desk HQ, which is your top information election results. So this is where they have it outlined. This is where most people who put results out, this is where they have it, of Republicans lead 53-47. So they win majority of the Senate. And then in the House, what they're saying is, as of right now, it's 220 Republicans, 213 Democrats, with a few elections out in California yet to be decided. But then when you go to basically what they're forecasting, where there are concerns, and what we want to highlight here is moving down into the House races, where you're seeing some concerns of the possible toss-ups within those states and the races that they're in. And so we want to make sure we're continuing to pray for those elections, making sure we understand, hey, things have not fully been set in stone. And we want to make sure that, the nefariousness that has occurred, and this goes back to even the beginning of America. This isn't just a recent thing. This has always been a thing of free and fair elections, and how certain states do it different than others, which cause nefarious actions. And Louisiana is best known historically for having issues, and we've talked about that here ad nauseum. So let's continue to pray. If you're in those states, take authority. Pray with those who are in those states, and know that there are people still watching, and this is not over. Because, and maybe you can close with this, is that as President Trump continues to nominate his cabinet,
yes,
he's pulling senators and congressmen into his cabinet. And I want to pull this up as well. He also has several, he made an appointment this morning. He has still, 12 more left to announce. So he could possibly pull more congressmen out. And if they're Republicans, as he's already pulled 2 with Lisa Stefanik and Matt Gaetz, now you have special elections coming forward that need to be played out, and what's going to happen with the Democrats there. So there's a lot left still to, 1, be determined, but then 2, with not only these races that are still out there to be called, and then also now the 2 special elections that have to happen in New York and Florida to replace Matt Gaetz, Elise Stefanik, and now J.D. Vance even in the Senate. So a lot still left to be pray for, and even Florida with Marco Rubio, pray for and to contend for here in the months and days ahead.
And let's face it, if we don't fill these positions before okay, so we got 4 congressmen that are gone now because their administration gets resigned. So what's going to happen is you'll lose your majority of voting. You'll still be the majority party, but you'll lose your voting until those seats are filled. So we got to fill them. Hopefully, in Florida, DeSantis will call an early election. If you think Hochul in New York's going to call an early election for Stefanik's seat, we're crazy. She's not going to help the Republicans at all in that state. So we have a problem there. So, and Mike Johnson has begged President Trump, please stop taking congressmen for your cabinet right now. And so we need to pray that he'll stop right now. We can't afford any more. Again, these districts in California, we got a 45. If we win 45, which is still possible, we'll have we can move up to 222. But it's 220 now. I think it's going to go to 221. I do believe that 22 will be off. And that's what we've been believing for, a 222 number. So as we close today, I want to make sure we cover that. Luke chapter 18, when the woman comes before the unjust judge, but the Lord says, now will not God bring about justice for his elect who cry out day and night, and will he delay long over them? I tell you that he will bring about justice for them quickly. However, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on the earth? God's looking to see if we're going to walk in faith in this issue. Now, we're giving you the natural information today, but a lot of natural information, but we're also weaving in the prophetic with it and the spiritual information that you need to pray accordingly. And what we're praying is like that chapter says, that verse says there in Luke 18, that we're not going to delay. We're going to keep praying day and night. And God says, I'll not delay. I'll bring forth my justice. But he wants to, when he comes, he wants to see us in faith. So let's stay in faith in this issue. It's very important if we're going to transition to the righteous things and deal with this lawlessness that we have showed you today. We're going to need a righteous leadership to come in there. And I believe the transformers are in this cabinet now to bring about transformation that we so need in America. Thank you for staying on the wall, 318. Staying with us this whole hour. Many of you stayed on the whole hour. Thank you so much. I know you got much to do in your life and you don't have to give us this hour, but we honor you for that. We pray for Israel today. We also pray for our nation. Let's finish well. Let's close out our race so that God's glory will be made known in all the earth. Isaiah 22:22, as you quoted there. Thank you for Danielle. God bless you. We'll see you tomorrow. We'll be covering some of these same issues of prayer for these states in our noon prayer tomorrow at 12 noon here from Christian Center Shreveport. The Pipeline Report closes out today.